Quiet quitting, yes. It's like you're not delivering more, you're not giving more. And there's that very strong expectation in the NHS, especially of doctors. And so we feel like we do need to burn ourselves to light other people's way. And we end up forgetting about the other things that are a priority for us in our lives and that have kept us going for such a long time.
Is it worth your time, your life, your energy, your dedication, your commitment to become a consultant in your chosen medical specialty? And I can tell you a lot more doctors are seriously considering this very question. Because as we all know, the life of a consultant is not necessarily the holy grail it once was. So today, my friends, we are going to be talking more about some of the misconceptions of getting to the top as a medical consultant, having finished your specialty training, and talking about a whole range of things around that, including some of the benefits of working in private practice, some of the alternatives to becoming a consultant. We touch upon salary. We touch upon crisis quitting, which is what a lot of us doctors do these days. And also, we talk about what you can do if you are seriously considering other options. Stay tuned to this episode featuring myself and Dr. Ola Abbas, who is the founder's associate at Medic Footprints and a dually trained consultant in acute medicine and intensive care, and the author of one of our more popular recent articles on 5 top misconceptions on becoming a consultant in the NHS. This is something you definitely do not want to miss. Let's face it, burnout amongst doctors is sky high, and we're actively seeking other ways to make the most of our transferable skills beyond the usual career pathways. Welcome to Disrupting Doctors' Careers. I'm your host, Dr. Ola Abbas, and I'm on a mission to connect 1 million doctors across the world with the best in diverse career opportunities. Well, today's episode is for all of you who are thinking about whether to continue with your specialty training as a doctor to become to the all holy grail of consultant life, or wondering whether it really is worth your time. So this is going to be one of the first podcasts where we feature our newest team member, Dr. Ola Abbas, who is a founder's associate at Medic Footprints and also a consultant in the NHS. She'll tell you a little bit more about what she does, and recently wrote a fantastic article on the 5 top misconceptions about becoming a consultant in the NHS. So we're going to take that article and actually broaden it out a little bit just to give you some insights from both our personal experiences being champions of diversity of careers, but at the same time still going for the traditional route, in some ways more than others, of becoming a consultant. So being the top of our kind of specialty training ladder and what we're doing with it at the same time. But anyway, what we'll cover today is, why did we train at consultant level? Why did we choose to even do this in the first place, considering our backgrounds? What do we expect? What did we expect as consultants, as in prior to actually getting to the place? What is it actually really like being a consultant? Comparing NHS and private consultant life. Obviously, we have to talk about salary expectations for that, and also what our plans are moving forward. So anyway, welcome, Ola. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me on, Abena. It's so exciting.
I totally did not draft you into this whatsoever, did I?
No, not at all. Not for weeks and weeks. You're going like, when are we going to do this podcast?
Yeah, not at all. I didn't do that. So let's get started. So Ola, you are dual trained CCT, for those of you that don't know, Certificate of Completion of Training. She is on the General Medical Register in the UK as a consultant in acute medicine and intensive care. So, I mean, we could go into the story of how you got there, but why was it important for you to train to that level?
Thank you. Very good question. And sometimes I reflect on it at the point where I am now, because obviously, you know, I'm pivoting towards a different journey, which we will touch on in just a minute. I suppose the real root cause to it comes from my personality being a finisher completer. It's like, you just have to finish it, you know, and being within, you just have to
finish it. It's like something out of a 90s game, isn't it?
Exactly. And you just
Mortal Kombat. Yeah.
And you can't quit when you're winning, can you? It's like, it's the winning streak. It was a winning streak doing registrar, passing the ARCPs, pass the exams, and you just go like to yourself, well, am I not going to finish it? And again, societal pressures or cultural pressures as well play a part of it, because they'll be like, well, you've got this job, you're in it. And there is this almost unspoken rule of like, if you stop doing it, it's almost like you can't do it. And for me, and I think that kind of like triggered something inside me, which I realize now it's something to work on, really. It was like, I have to finish it to prove that I can finish it, that I will finish this thing because I started it. And also because when I started it, I thought it will end in a different way, rather than get into the consultant post and seeing that what I thought it would be is not really what it is.
I mean, I definitely echo what you said, in the sense that, yeah, there was a very strong feeling for me of like finishing something in medicine. Like I think a lot of it actually came from my mum, who was like, when are you going to finish anything? Like, you're doing all these exams and you're like going on these pathways. When are you actually just going to finish it? Because I changed from surgery to occupational medicine, and then quit occupational medicine specialty training the year before I was due to finish. Maybe because I was just scared of finishing. No, but I knew I was going to finish my own way, which was down the Caesar route. Yeah. But why get to the end? Especially occupational medicine. You know, most occupational medicine doctors they're not consultants, so they don't have their membership. They, you know, some of them, the most they have is a diploma, and they still work at a very high level. So I guess the decision wasn't, oh, if I don't get this, then I won't be able to work at a high level and command a high salary and respect. It was more, I think, just finishing something and just being done with it, kind of thing, in that sense. So I think I totally agree. But I guess, the question, what were you expecting when you at that level?
Because
what would life reasonably be like? I mean, what was I expecting? I think if I look at my medical or surgical career, what was I expecting? I was expecting maybe to just be, I don't know, I think the ideal, but this has changed over the years, that the ideal would be, you know, to be the authority voice and opinion, but not necessarily have to be doing all the legwork that the junior doctors do and command a higher salary. But I think now, you know, you can see that when you get to consultant level, especially in the NHS in particular, you have that authority voice, but you're still kind of quite far down the hierarchy.
You have the voice, you can talk, but your voice is on mute.
Your voice is muted, more muted than you realized. But what's your thoughts on that?
Because I hear from quite a few registrars, and for me as well, it probably was true on some level. It was like, I'll get to consultant and then I don't have to deal with all of this. I don't have to deal with, you know, the fact of being dictated to do this and that. Like, I don't have control over my leave. Like, you know, I'm going to get a better room or a place to sit in, or I'm actually going to get a desk to sit at to be able to do the work that I'm contracted to do, that I'm going to get better pay, that I'm going to have, you know, a different, like you said, like a different level of command where I say something and someone actually listens to it.
And it gets done.
It gets done, yes, and it gets done. And where it's like almost like you open up the door and you've gone into Narnia, and like everything is just magical and mystical and beautiful and streamlined. But reality is that it's not by any stretch of it. And I think what struck me the most about it is that how different the same role can be in different hospitals.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can be a consultant in the same specialty, having the same amount of salary, working, doing the same amount of clinical work, but your conditions of working are vastly different from one hospital to another. And while you may not notice that as a registrar, like in training, when you're in a consultant and you're in there for the longer term, though, even if it's a small difference, it will start to matter a lot.
Well, I guess because as a consultant, you end up being part of the furniture because you're not moving around as much as you did ever in your career thus far. And so actually, you know, half of your job, I'm sure, is also in like negotiating the hospital politics and standing your ground and putting your stake. And that takes years and years for people to actually trust you, right?
Yeah. It does. Like leaving your mark, being noticed, listened to. It does take far more than just completing your registrar training.
Absolutely. And I'm just thinking, compared to the private sector, is very different in the sense that you can choose how you decide to work depending on what kind of arrangements you have. So you can be employed in the private sector and you may get a similar work experience that you do in the NHS. But yeah, I think whenever you take any kind of job, it is about doing your due diligence over the employer, the culture, what the work is like, et cetera, et cetera. And there aren't that many doctors that purely work in the private sector. I'm talking about standard medical roles, particularly the hospital medicine roles. But as a consultant in occupational medicine, I do work solely in the private sector. But I do actually do NHS work, which is for me the best arrangement. Don't work for the NHS, you know, work with the NHS. It really is a different, and actually it does work better. It does work much better for me. I think the idea of being able to influence and support at a level where you can actually just take a step back and not be part of the institution in some ways, you know, does help. It helps on the advisory and the work that you do. And I know lots of doctors that do that. But then, like, moving forward, discussing the differences in general between working in the NHS and the private sector as a consultant. Have you ever worked in the private sector?
No,
at all? Has that ever been a consideration as part of your kind of exit plan, or any of your colleagues, for example? Because one of the things that I remember, especially as a trainee or junior doctor, is like, oh, at some point I'll be able to work in the private sector and then I'll get more money and my life will be easier, blah 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 blah. Like, was that ever in your kind of road plan?
I would have liked to work in the private sector. However, still feel with my specialities that it would be a very difficult thing to do in terms of risk, responsibility and indemnity. And I don't feel that either acute medicine or intensive care are established to the level that you can do it in private practice. There's a level 2 care, I think there's level 3 care as well, but it's not the same of what you would get to do clinically when you're in the NHS. But colleagues of mine who are in anesthetics definitely have ventured out into private.
How they found it?
Oh, they love it.
Why? Tell me more.
It's streamlined. It's efficient. The things get done. You say something, there is a result. Payment is much better. The quality of the treatment, the recognition is different.
Great. Do they kind of work partly in private, partly in NHS?
Yes. Yeah.
And how do they find balancing the two?
With great difficulty, because they still have full-time jobs in the NHS. So they'd have to do the 12 PAs to be able to give time to private
How
care.
do they do that then?
I have no idea. I'm struggling with 10.
and why do that?
Why do 12?
No, why do both if they're obliged to do? Yeah, but I guess it takes away from the time, your work-life balance.
Yeah, well, then again, that opens up the bigger can of worms. Do we really have work-life balance? And the answer is no. But yeah, some people choose to do that, and they choose to work that much to get the money for whatever purpose that they need it for.
And this, so go on.
Oh, I suppose as doctors, it's not very well established for us as other ways of making money other than, so you do your regular job, you can locum or do private. That's kind of like the ways that we are conditioned to think about, how am I going to get extra money to put my children through private school kind of thing. we don't think that like we can use our skills into doing something else that will be far more profitable, that will give us a better balance in life. And and we can still use those doctor skills in it. So I suppose that's part of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, like we only know what we know, and especially if you have only worked in the NHS, or you haven't really had any exposure to life outside of the NHS, maybe personally or through friends and family, then yeah, you'll constantly be trading your time for money on that sense, without realizing that beyond the usual investment pathways, there's plenty of other opportunities to earn without having to actually do more work, so to speak. And just going back to the article that you kindly published, 3 Medic Footprints, on the top 5 misconceptions about being a consultant in the NHS. My first question was, where is this picture? You're standing looking quite proud of yourself, in some kind of high some office that is high above the ground, with like wall to floor windows. Are you sure that's an NHS building? Really?
Definitely not.
And you're wearing lipstick and and you
heels.
Don't look like you're
the heels don't show,
we can't see the heels. You can't see the heels. But this
it.
looks more like something out of The Apprentice than working in the NHS. So where was this photo taken?
This was in one of the high-rise hotels in Frankfurt.
Of course, it wasn't the NHS.
That was to show people, like, you're not going to get that office. No, you're not. You're not going to get an office to start with. I mean, some consultants do, but not all, and then definitely not me. Yeah, ended up with a hot desk.
How about secretary? Do you get one of those?
No. God,
you don't get a secretary. Who does your admin? You do.
I do my admin. Come on.
Gosh, well, you've had years to really get to grips with the admin, and that's the one thing you learn from day one as doctors, admin.
Yeah.
But going back to what you're talking about, reaching the pinnacle of your NHS career, in the article you also refer to, reality is you'll be finding yourself at the base camp of yet another mountain you need to climb. So I'd love to hear from you what that realistically looks like in your specialty. So speaking from my specialty and the way that I work, I feel like I've climbed my mountain, and there are lots of other mountains that I could potentially climb if I wanted to, or I could go to the beach.
Right, beach sounds better.
I've got options. And I think it really is about how I've set up my work arrangements, which means that I've got a range of options. So I'm not in a conventional where I am working in NHS and I do have a whole load of people above me. That's not how it works for me. But I'd love to hear more about how it's been for you and your colleagues.
Yeah, and I suppose it's different for you because you found your balance and you found your challenges and other things, and that keeps your appetite going, I suppose, for new adventures. And so when you go to the beach, it's well deserved. But when you are in the NHS and when you do this as a full-time job, if you do want to keep that, you can coast by and you can do the absolute bare minimum. But for me, that's soul destroying. As a human being, I won't be able to do it. And what I meant by saying, like, when you get to the consultant level, you need to climb into another mountain, is that how you need to distinguish yourself among the other consultants. So it's like, you came in as a registrar and you have to work your way up until ST7 to become a consultant. You come in as a consultant and you have to work your way, whether that is through projects, through leadership, through management, through teaching, etc. There's more things that you need to do, learn, put under your belt to actually move more up in the department. And whether that is for monetary purposes, whether that's for recognition purposes, whether that is to feed your hunger for challenge, or whether that is, just to kind of like have a voice, because you'd often find yourself like you'd go into these meetings, and if you're not climbing those mountains, then you don't really have anything to say or be said to. And I suppose some people might be happy with that, but I think it's really important to highlight it out for for others that, you know, like this is something that you're going to need to work on, and you're going to need to be put in some legwork to distinguish yourself.
So would you say the road after you finished your training is actually more focusing, as you've also highlighted, on the management, the leadership, the politics, the influence, everything else that we for some reason haven't necessarily been supported in learning until this point in time for some reason?
95% of my job is management, managing people, politics. 5% is clinical.
And how much of that did you get to practice before you
Zero.
became a consultant? Why did they do that to us?
I don't know. It's like, it's all clinical. And towards the end of my training, in all fairness, I think it was ST5 or 6 or something, we did have to do like a leadership course. I think it was like with one of the universities, can't remember which one now. We had to do that and submit an assignment, and that was our exposure to leadership. And then you become a consultant, and then 95% of my day job when I go in is managing people, politics, the beds. That's very topical in ICU. Do you have a bed? And then managing in and out, and managing people's expectations as well as moods. And then 5% I get to do like my ward round and purely talk about patient care. And I don't know why the system is designed in such way to give you the absolute reverse of what your reality is going to be.
It's interesting because when I was a younger doctor, I remember very clearly, this is like I still am in my 30s, but when I was in my earlier 30s, I remember asking my consultant to support me in going to the NHS Leadership Academy for a course for Black minority ethnic people called Ready Now. It's a really great course. But I very clearly, and will never forget her saying, well, she's saying, I was ST3 at the time, and she was saying, I do think it's a bit too early for you, Abena, to be going for these kind of leadership stuff. Like you should be focusing on history, taking medical histories and things like that.
Did
you like by the well, no, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, again, I think it just represents the mindset of like leadership should be kind of learned later on, when actually it should be learned like on day one, day bloody one. And you'll see that I always compare it to nursing and how I get the perception that nurses get a lot more support in the leadership and management earlier on so that they can progress in their careers too, because they do end up doing a lot of leadership stuff, or they can do, or they're positioned to be able to do that earlier. And I'm not sure why it's not the same for doctors. That question hasn't really been answered or addressed. I mean, have you noticed that? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have noticed that there has been a sway towards other health. It's not been a sway towards, but like I think doctors are being used more and more, maybe because of the staff shortages. I don't know, or maybe because of
delivery stuff.
Having no insight into the impact of this, that there is no attention to leadership towards the earlier stages in one's career. I mean, there is, when you and I don't know if this is across the board in all of the NHS, but we do have like a program for new consultants, to like a leadership program for new consultants that you can enroll in once you become a consultant. But I really think that that's too late for someone to learn that vital part of their role. Yeah,
totally agree. So why, I mean, actually, let's go on to salary.
Yep. It's not that good, guys.
Yeah. So what were you expecting from a salary perspective? Actually, I kind of think, what was I expecting? Like a lot, like most doctors, we're not really driven by the money, or else we'd be kind of in a hedge fund or somewhere. So actually, I didn't really think much about salary, but all I knew is that I would be getting more, and it would be stable and reliable, which is completely the case as long as you keep your GMC number in your practice. But if we look at the realities of pay for doctors, also in relation to other similar professionals, and how it's changed over the years, what exactly are we looking at these days?
So for me, the salary hasn't really been an issue or it's like I've not noticed it until I started to venture out in business. Because like you said, it's an lift up from what we used to be paid as registrars. We know we all get taxed, we all pay not all of us pay into our pensions, but if you've made that decision, then you know what's going out, and we all pay the NI and et cetera, et cetera. In fact, when I started a consultant job, you start to get some increments for like for doing out of hours, and some extra bonuses that can come along with the basic salary, which is decent. It's fine, but it's decent and fine for me living on my own, having no kids. I don't know what it would feel like for someone who do have children and need to pay those extra bills, in terms of a family. But when I started to get into business and I started to meet other individuals who are in their early 20s or early 30s, and I started to see what they do and what the return of investment is on their time. When I started to really think about it, I was like, I'm trading my time for very little money, a lot of my time for very little money, when I can use the skill and the powerful skills that I have into generating far more if I was to utilize that in business or in other avenues, which make me feel that like we are massively underpaid as doctors, considering the amount of risk and responsibility that we have on our shoulders. And the other thing that really made me think that what is going on with this pay, that it's not good enough, is when it comes to the annual allowance, the taxation that comes on the back of that, the fact that, so for example, when you're a consultant, you don't get paid mileage for traveling to the hospital. Just doesn't happen. They will pay you a relocation, but they won't pay you mileage. So you notice that increment of cost with increments of cost of living. What was the other thing as well that I wanted to mention about with the pay? Oh, the change in the clinical excellence awards, of how that gets paid. Some people say it's become more fair. Some people says it's become less fair. The change in awards, again, when you get an award and how you get paid for it, that has been changed. To be honest, I've not really sought any of those awards because it's just complicated with the payments and the amount of work that you had to do to get them in the first place. So yeah, that's when it kind of like really struck me as, hold on a second. So I'm a consultant and I'm in like my 4th year of my pay scale and I've not hit 6 figures. I'm like, what's going on here? And you can see in the alternate universe what other people are making. And it's not about the money at the end of the day. It is about reward and recognition. And if you feel like, trading so much for little back in return, together with everything, with other misconceptions about the job, you just go like, hold on a second, there's something else better here.
Yeah, no, I think you've made some really interesting and insightful points there. And it's made me reflect on actually, being more cognizant of the value of money. Or not actually, just understanding money in general. Because like, I did not really understand my paycheck at all until actually quite relatively recently when I ended up, now I've got 2 limited companies. I'm employed by one of those companies. I take dividends from the other company. I'm like on my accountant's back all the time asking questions about tax. I never did any of that when I was in the NHS because it's all done for you and you just assume whatever you get. But I think another point is I did recognize how, as like you've alluded to, how doctors are valued in the NHS compared to in the private sector. You could have really recognize what your market worth is. And it's not to say it's just about the salary at the end of the day. It's also about, the pension. So NHS pension, even though they've changed it every few years, you still won't get a better pension than the NHS pension. And for some people, that's hugely important. But for others, pension is like generation away. And it's like, well, actually, there's a lot more priorities that mean more to me in my life in the day to day, assuming, not knowing how long I'll actually live anyway to see my pension. But I mean, I think that's just another important factor for doctors to think about when they are stepping out. It's not just the bottom line salary, it's all the other stuff that comes with it. But the reality is, you'll see that doctors' salaries in relation to cost of living has dropped over the last 10 years quite substantially. Some people quote up to 30% in real terms. I mean, that's huge. That is huge. And as we know, this is now October 22. And we've just had some crazy cray announcements from the new chancellor. I have to say, I could say this because I'm black. He's a black man, and he's coming in and making some amazingly wild radical changes to things that really impact on a lot of people, like, you know, obviously the whole country, which actually benefits the rich more so. And the assumption is that the rich will then support the poor. We cannot assume anything in this country. I think that's hugely risky measure they've taken. But at the end of the day, it still doesn't change the fact that the cost of living is increasing. NHS pay for not just doctors, but generally all staff is not increasing in line with inflation. And so the question for you, if you're listening, is, you know, A, where is this likely to go? And B, is this important enough for you to then start moving with your feet? Because as you said, like, money is not, it's not the be all and end all for anyone, definitely not. And job satisfaction is probably one of the biggest ones up there, well-being and job satisfaction. But we know that a lot of doctors aren't finding that in the NHS right now. They're not finding that in their jobs, and they are exploring or looking elsewhere or moving elsewhere. But these are all factors that I know that doctors will consider, because I know so many doctors. I've had so many stories of doctors where they get to a point later on in their careers and they're literally like a year away from CCT, or they've delayed CCT for some reason, usually not always consciously, sometimes unconsciously. They'll say, oh, I'll just do a PhD, oh, I'll just do this fellowship, or I'll just do something that doesn't get me to CCT. And then they're like, actually, I just don't want to do this, I just don't want this career. It's like the most competitive specialty ever, and I'm saying no to it. I'm saying no. And it's a really challenging thing to do. And I think if, depending on what stage you are in your specialty training or your career in medicine, I would definitely recommend you stop and pause every time you're about to commit to a training program that takes you to the top, whatever the top is. Because reality is, you don't have to be at the top to work sustainably in a specialty that you love. You do not have to do that. And maybe I'm referring to becoming an associate specialist. Maybe I'm just referring to working as a doctor, general medical doctor, medical officer. You know, you can have great satisfaction in those kind of roles. It's not to poo-poo it at all. It just depends on really what you want for your life. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think we get into this very narrow vision of like, I want to get as much as possible from this career because I'm in this competitive, very sought after. A lot of people will be grateful to have what I have kind of view, and we go all in. And also, let's not forget the culture in the NHS is a culture that asks for more, demands more. It's almost like, I was reading something the other day about if you're just doing the requirements of your job and you leave on time and you come in on time, then you are silently quitting. There's this concept of silently quitting because you're not going way above expectations.
Quiet quitting. Yes. It's like you're not delivering more, you're not giving more. And there's that very strong expectation in the NHS, especially of doctors. And so we feel like we do need to burn ourselves to light other people's way, and we end up forgetting about the other things that are a priority for us in our lives and that have kept us going for such a long time. Yeah, I don't really see many doctors kind of quiet quitting. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't any, but as you said, like, I think the nature of a doctor is just to kind of go above and beyond. And I'd say kind of a loud quitting is probably a better term.
Well, that's the thing. Like I think we don't do the quiet quitting, and we keep on giving more, even though that we can't give any more, and then we fall apart. Yeah,
exactly. Crisis quitting.
Yes,
I think it's
like that. Crisis quitting.
Yeah. So, well, I think we've come to the end of that discussion.
Ending on a crisis.
Ending on crisis. But I mean, realistically, what advice would you give to doctors who are considering whether to become a consultant, or even whether to quit their specialty training, or even quit at consultant level? Like, what kind of advice would you give to them if they're kind of in that zone where it's like, should I bother? Really? What's your thoughts on that? Considering what we know about the realities of being a consultant in the NHS, but also in private sector?
Yeah. I would say speak to a friend, speak to a good friend, and get some real expectations about what the job is going to be like on the other side. Now, you have to be careful of it, because when you're applying for a place, they are, and this is the nature of marketing, they're going to market themselves in the best way possible. And that's not to deceive you. I don't think anybody wants to deceive anybody, but I think it comes onto the candidate to ask those important, powerful questions that will uncover what it is really like on the other side. Because think about it, you're getting into a marriage. And yes, you can get a divorce later on, but do you really want to get into a marriage to get a divorce later on? Just have a think about that. So I would say ask questions about what the real expectations are. Be prepared from a financial point of view, because a lot of us, majority, if not all of us, we don't know about our finances, and your pay will be let's say you're going to need to go back and forth with HR quite a few times once you get appointed to get it sorted and get it right. So make sure you financially know what you are getting into, and gauge your expectations to that. And if you are wondering if it's the right move or it's not the right move, then maybe it's not. That voice inside you is there for a reason. So I urge you to take time. Take time off. It might be a week, it might be 2, it might be a month, it might be that you need to speak to someone, might be you need coaching, it might be you need some other form of support. But if that question is on your mind, I think you should honor it, and you should get to an answer before you move the next step.
I'm talking about divorcing, Ola. Are you divorcing your specialty?
I'm divorcing the NHS.
Oh, why have you decided to do that after everything it took to get there in the first place, with not one but 2 specialties, CCTs? It's
been a long, arduous journey, and I have come to the conclusion that for me, to align with my values, to honor my priorities in life, because at the end of the day, it's not just about working and going overboard at work. It's about a lot of other things that are important to me in my life, and also the fact that I can see what is out there, and I can see that I can have a bigger, more positive impact, and a voice that's not muted in other avenues around medicine or around clinical, or not entirely not related to it, but they speak to my values and to my passions. And so yeah, I'm drawing up the divorce papers.
What could they do to keep you and retain you?
Oh, they can't.
Why not?
Money can't buy me back, and that's pretty much the only bargaining chip that they have.
Really? You think money's the only thing they could offer you to bargain? Would there not be anything else? Think so, someone like you and me became the head of the NHS. And we know that throwing money at people doesn't always work.
No, it doesn't. But that's
other things that could potentially go much further. What, sky's the limit. What could they potentially offer you that would keep you there?
It would need a radical transformation in the way that the NHS treats its doctors. Yeah. It goes beyond, and it's like I said, it's not the money, it's about value, it's about recognition, it's about having that voice. It's really about a lot of other things. The paycheck, I mean, we're always going to make money. We're so highly qualified. I'm so highly qualified. I'm always going to find
you are definitely an employable person.
Exactly. Yes. And I'm resourceful, highly qualified. I'm always going to find ways to make money, but it's about how you feel when you're making it. And for me to be persuaded into staying, it's going to need a major transformation in the way that things are done, and also in the way that people even think, so to speak. Yeah.
Well, let's end it there. Thank you so much for your candid thoughts on that, Ola. And as we know, there are lots of opportunities for doctors to get further one-to-one support from us at Medic Footprints. If you are interested, please feel free to join our membership. If you go to the Medic Footprints website, medicfootprints.org/go premium, there is more information there on one-to-one mentorship from ourselves, as well as CV reviews, as well as literally like hundreds and hundreds of hours of webinars on various career opportunities, and more. And you get the podcasts very shortly after they're recorded and not months later like everyone else. So that's just some of the benefits of joining us as a member. And if you have any questions about anything that we discussed today, feel free to email us at team@medicfootprints.org. Anything else to add, Ola?
No, thank you very much. And I have to say that Medic Footprints has definitely been a big support in terms of being part of the community and listening and seeing what other options are out there, and also finding other people that are on the same wavelength, because we can be made to feel like we're the odd one out when we want to divorce the NHS. So people, you've got other people that have your back.
Well spoken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to team@medicfootprints.org us. Make sure that you subscribe to Medic Footprints mailing list at medicfootprints.org/join our mission. Be one of the thousands and thousands of doctors across the world who are taking their careers into their own hands. Finally, I'm so glad. Until next episode.